China has revoked the press credentials of 3 Wall Street Journal journalists as Beijing pushes back against what it sees as racist-laden remarks unleashed by the coronavirus epidemic. On February the 3rd, the Wall Street Journal published an opinion piece titled "China is the real sick man of Asia." Beijing had demanded an apology from the paper, which the paper has yet to do. Now, the issue has now erupted into another diplomatic row between China and the United States. How to look at the Chinese reaction? Should claims of freedom of speech justify deeply offensive language? Joining me for the discussion from Beijing is Professor Peixin of the Communications University of China. From Philadelphia, Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of Grasshopper Strategies, and from Paris, Professor Joav Toker of the American Graduate School in Paris. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Very quickly, timeline of the situation. So basically, the Foreign Ministry of China says the Chinese people do not welcome media that use racially discriminatory languages and maliciously slander and attack China. Now, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. condemned the move by the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, basically calling China immature and irresponsible in restricting free speech. Then China's Foreign Ministry again reacted by saying if the paper has the right to insult others, does the victim have the right to strike back? Then on the 19th, the paper posted a statement saying that it was not the intention of the paper, of the piece, to cause offense with the headline, but the paper regrets that the piece clearly caused upset and concern among the Chinese people. But then the decision to target their news department journalists hinders these reporters' job from reporting to China. And then on the 20th, the paper posted another statement calling the decision harsh and unprecedented. And the statement also highlighted its reporting history in China and praised the work of the journalists dispelled, and says they will continue to push for the Chinese decision to be reversed. And then on Thursday, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs again said China is not interested in the internal decision of the paper or division of the paper. There is only one Wall Street Journal, and the paper has to be responsible for its words and deeds. So, Brandon, let me go to you first, because you're an American. Is any kind of language acceptable so long as it is the title or it is the content of an opinion piece?
No, racially insensitive language is never, in my opinion, reasonable or allowed or something that anybody should be engaging in. Unfortunately, we live in a world with a president of the United States and a number of other leaders around the world that engage in it all the time, but that's beside the point. More specifically on this language, one of the questions has to be is the phrase "the sick man of" specifically racist or targeting towards Asia? Consider that the phrase traces its history back to calling the Ottoman Empire the sick man of Europe, and has been used repeatedly throughout the last 200 years, it's hard for most Western audiences to understand the implication that it has towards specifically a Chinese audience. That's because the phrase was used repeatedly during a period of China struggling with Western influence in the 19th and early 20th century. And so Chinese public do see this as a very offensive term. So offensive that Bruce Lee in a 1970s movie slammed a picture that had, written in Japanese, "China is the sick man of Asia," and it was celebrated as this big moment of Chinese national pride in this movie. So it is a phrase that I think most Western observers would not understand the specific history related to China. It is a phrase that frankly has shown up repeatedly throughout commentary about the world, about UK and Britain and Brexit. UK was called the sick man there. So a lot of people would say we don't really understand this, but it is clear that the Chinese public has found offense by this. It is clear that the Chinese government has taken offense by this. And at that level, you have to say, hey, is it worth changing a headline and acknowledging that potentially a mistake was made here, relatively unintentionally. But even if it's unintentional, it's still a mistake. And when they say they regret it, that's basically an apology in my book. So if I was the managing editor, I'd say, hey, we regret it. We're going to update the headline. We're going to add a little acknowledgement that this is a phrase that we are frankly unprepared to deal with the specific implications to China, and we probably shouldn't have used it, particularly in light to the recent issues with coronavirus.
But they didn't do any of that. They didn't retract the headline. They didn't change their headline. They didn't put any anything. They didn't apologize. They only said they regret. So, Joav, let me go to you. From your perspective, what do you see is the problem? Is it the vulnerability of the Chinese mind when we see something like this that we become very offended? Or is it that if you even unintentionally did something that hurt the feeling of someone, then you have the responsibility to do something to correct that.
Yeah, well, I think that we have to look at it on the larger context and the larger, regardless of the details attached to this incident and the timeline of them, which you just indicated 3 minutes ago. We are in a context in which these two superpowers are confronting each other on the diplomatic, commercial, trade, if you wish, strategic, geostrategic level. And this is not the first incident over the last week or the last month or the last decade, right? So this is what all these things, I believe, should be considered, regardless of details associated with the way the title of the Wall Street Journal op-ed article was worded, which is, of course, of bad taste, at least, especially these days when China is going through this virus tragedy, and just the use of the word sick man or sick as such is really far away from being less than elegant. So, but I don't believe this is the issue. The issue is what kind of relations are there between superpowers or between nations on Earth which do connect press entities with diplomatic, strategic, political interest. And this is perhaps a wider sphere in which we could pass judgment, including the judgment regarding the way the Wall Street Journal authorities behaved and the state of China and the Foreign Ministry of China behaved.
So
and in this sense,
yeah.
I think that everybody was mistaken. The Wall Street Journal was mistaken in titling this op-ed page the way it did. And if I may, Chinese authorities went too far in expelling filling the credentials of 3 reporters of an American newspaper.
Okay, Professor Cao of the Communications University, what is your understanding? First of all, you know, from what Brandon said, this kind of title have appeared in and be used on other countries. This has to be admitted. However, as Brandon rightfully pointed out, you know, this is not an unknown history that the Chinese people were called the sick man of Asia or sick man of East Asia, and especially, as Joav said, in this very particular period of time, such a title is very, very offensive, let's say. So what do you think is really behind all of this?
I think the professor has a very good explanation for the title, because everyone who knows the modern history of China should know how harsh and how hurting this title is in the ears of Chinese people. So on that point, I just would agree with him. But I would go a little further about the conflict between the Chinese and the American media. On the background of China and the U.S. conflicts, economic and other perspectives, I think we could also compete or talk about the media ethics. We have very different media ethics because we belong to 2 media systems where the identity, the function, and how the daily running of the media differ from each other. So we should mutually respect each other's media ethic. But I think we have some common ground for the ethics. For example, we should not evoke conflict. We should not talk about hate speech. We should not be racist. So on that point, we have no difference. In this perspective, I think we could come to one point of this media ethics issue. I think the conflict today with the American Wall Street Journal is not the beginning, is not the end. It's also, in the end, not a big issue. It's a time that we show our stance, because in the future we are going to interact further with each other, and I think it's a good time to learn the lesson to respect each other's feelings and learn a little bit more about each other's history.
Well, say in the United States, if you write or if on the Chinese newspaper where people write about the glorious past of slavery, you know, or to glorify slavery, or to use very bad words against black people in America, I'm sure there will be an uproar. There will be a lot of people crying foul as well. And according to my understanding, it is not unprecedented for U.S. newspaper to change their title. For instance, this latest Washington Post changed their title of an article when the writer talked about it is time for the elites to have more say in choosing their president. Obviously, obviously, after an uproar on social media, the newspaper agreed to change their title. So my question, Brandon, how come that when it comes to China, there is just so much hardness there, that the head has to be so high that even if it is understandable that although they didn't intend it, a mistake has been made, and there is no, change the title or say something or put a word there or something, just by saying I regret. A lot of people know in English, if you really regret, you say a little bit more than that. Brandon.
Look, it's well within the Wall Street Journal's power to have changed the headline. It's well within their ability to have gone in and added an editorial.
And they wouldn't have said that if
the
China
op-ed.
has not protested.
The Washington Post, look, right, but the Washington Post is a completely different organization. They have completely different rules. So Wall Street Journal doesn't have to follow what they do, nor the other way around. On the other end, what we're really talking about unprecedented is 3 news reporters are being expelled from China, a move that has not been done in over 20 years in China, over an op-ed written in the United States that frankly can't even be read inside China. So that's where I'd say we're dealing with unprecedented reaction to something that I would acknowledge deserves all the criticism it's getting aimed at the Wall Street Journal's headline choice, but does not warrant the expulsion of news reporters which are from a separate part of an organization and deal with transparency and facts.
But it's part of,
building understanding across
the Chinese
lines.
rationale is it's part of the organization. They don't have anybody else, and they don't have their opinion sector writer in China. If they would have an opinion writer in China, that would probably be the right person to expel. Right now, they don't have it, so that's the only thing the Chinese authority can do. Joav, let me go to you. 20 seconds, please. Your reaction.
Yeah, my interpretation goes back 18 days. February goes beyond that, as I tried to express earlier. And I believe that whatever we're witnessing and deliberating here and analyzing is actually linked to the fact that the U.S. took the step of designating 5 major Chinese media as not anymore media organizations, but foreign missions. That was a diplomatic move on the geostrategic level, and I believe that one way or the other, the Chinese reaction attached formally to the Wall Street Journal op-ed article was, if not directly linked to in the minds of those who took this decision in Beijing, at least would be written down into history, into that. So that's the point. The overall weight which is on Chinese-U.S. relations these days.
Yeah, we have to leave it there. I just want to read out one quick answer to Mr. Pompeo's tweet, which says, we totally should be aghast when the country's leaders label press outlets fake news and the enemy of the people. Am I right? And he got 3.4 thousand likes. So with that, I have to wrap up the show. Many thanks to Joav, Toker, Professor Peixin and Brandon for joining us. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As usual, follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with Alex. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.